My youngest brother sent me a text one day. He'd saved up $700 and wanted a computer. I told him, I know a subreddit we can go to, but no. He's found a guy on CL with a machine. Says it's like a $1,000 machine for $600. Want me to go with him to check it out. I can't. Schedule is packed. Guy basically says he can do a Skype call showing the PC working, and I can peek inside the guts from the video call, so I do that. It looks good. Very high-end computer and everything is brand new with boxes for the components. I tell my little bro, who was 18, that it's all good. If he can snatch it, go for it. Well, about 8 p.m., I get a Skype message from the CL seller. I got your brother. I fucking freeze. Blood runs cold, and for a solid 20 seconds that felt like hours. I started running through how I was going to find this motherfucker and murder him with my bare hands for threatening to hurt my baby brother. Finally, he finishes typing his second message. He wanted to meet in Walmart parking lot. We met up, and I got out to shake his hand and he just fainted. He's sitting in my SUV. He woke up once and just passed right back out. So I told my bro no because I had work, but obviously this needed to be handled. So I go out, I get out of my car and instantly see why my brother basically shit his pants. This dude steps around the SUV and is like 9 feet tall, exaggerating, 7 foot and some change, and was so jacked I think he could beat up Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. I'm a little less paranoid than my brother, so I hold my hand out for a shake. We do so, and he puts a giant hand on my shoulder and points inside the SUV. I can see my little brother, sitting in the far back seat with his knees on his chest, like a puppy during a thunderstorm. I chat with the guy. He literally just tried to meet my brother to sell the computer, but he actually fainted in terror. He scooped him up and put him in the back seat to rest. It actually happened. So I opened the door and popped my head in. Little bro basically on the verge of tears. Explained the situation to him. He admits that he thought the CL seller was going to beat him up, steal his $800, and possibly touch his bum inappropriately. I laugh. The seller laughs. I chat with the guy for a bit as my brother is loading the stuff into his car. The guy said he bought computer parts yearly when they went on sale and always sold them for a profit for himself, but at a pretty low cost since he slowly built them over the year. Was actually a really great guy. Said my brother was the first person to ever pass out in fear. I mean, all's well that ends well, and I'm sure it was more scary from my brother's POV, but getting a message from a guy on Skype, "I have your brother," is pretty damn scary to be honest. I had an entertainment center advertised, and a woman asked to come over to have a look at it. We set up a time, and when the time came, she didn't show up. I texted her, and a couple hours later she replied and asked if it was too late to come by. It was 10 p.m., but I said okay. She said she would be there in 10 minutes, but wasn't there 20 minutes later, and I texted her again. 10 more minutes, she said, but she hadn't shown up by 11 p.m., so I texted again and said we would have to do it another day, and she replied that she was just pulling up. I go to my front door, and sure enough, she is pulling into the driveway, and there are about 4 or 5 other people in the car with her. They all get out and start walking towards the door, and I ask them what they are doing, and the woman says they all want to see the entertainment center. I tell her that only she can come in, and at that point, I wasn't sure I even wanted her to come in. She says she needs at least one other person's opinion. I say no, she gets indignant, and I ask her to leave. And she says that I am not being a very good Christian. I say I am fine with that, and went in my house and locked all the doors, peeking out the window. One of the dudes who was with her is pissing at the end of my driveway, but then they get in the car and drive away. The whole thing was super bizarre. I had just moved to NYC 6 weeks after graduating from college. I had a shitty internship that paid something like $1,500 a month in the form of a stipend. Yes, I am that transplant idiot that comes here completely unprepared for the realities of living in this city. I had been looking for an apartment while living in a hostel in Williamsburg. I was going on my second week of living there when I came across an ad that looked too good to be true. $800 a month for a 1-bed, 1-bath in Hell's Kitchen, which was within walking distance of my job. A perfect situation since I couldn't afford a monthly metro pass, even with this astonishingly low rent. If I saw this now, I would just keep scrolling down the page. However, I was young and naive, and also broke as a motherfucker, obviously. Plus, my new neighbors at the hostel were a French couple that had really loud sex, despite the fact that this was one of those places where the walls stopped one short of the ceiling. I was itching to get out. So having no other options, I took the train up to 50th Street and walked to the apartment. It was directly between 8th and 9th Ave, so a relatively clean, safe, incredibly convenient location, albeit sandwiched between Times Square and a very lively stretch of gay bars. No judgment, just trying to paint a picture of the people frequenting this area. I walk into the doorman building with a modest lobby and go up to the 3rd floor. There I am greeted by a short, stout, middle-aged Jewish man. He looks and sounds like a stereotypical New Yorker in a movie or TV show from the 90s. The first anyone might notice about this man are the Coke bottle glasses that make his eyes unnaturally large. When he stares at me, which would be often over the coming months, his eyes are wide and the whites completely surround the iris, and he blinks in threes, wincing a little each time. His black t-shirt is tight across his protruding belly and contains a constellation of various types of crumbs and condiment stains. He's wearing knee-length cargo shorts and white tube socks so that only a few inches of his pasty, hairless shins are visible. His accent is a thick, of the South Brooklyn variety, and at times unintelligible to my virgin ears. He invites me into the apartment, which I immediately see is completely overflowing with junk. One might say he had 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Most of these items are newspapers and magazines, a few random tchotchkes, and some old, ugly furniture that's too large for the space. As I sit and talk with him about the specifics, I start to notice plastic grocery bags hanging all over the apartment, clearly filled with something, though it will be months before I figure out what's inside. As I should have guessed, and as most people may have assumed by now, the terms of this rental were a bit sketchy. He was offering the room to sublet, illegally, I later discovered, at the price he posted on Craigslist. This room was amazing, oversized with a big closet and my own window unit, which he was paying for. The $800 was all-inclusive. But what wasn't mentioned in the ad was that he would still be living there, on the couch. He had no job, no close friends or family. He would just sit there all day smoking weed. But the price and proximity to work was too much to pass up, so I took the unit. I moved in a few days later with the singular suitcase I had brought with me. The first night there, I barricaded myself in, lest I be murdered in my sleep and my skin turned into a lampshade. But over the next 4 months, we developed a tenuously civil relationship, becoming something almost resembling friends. He would sit around all day and smoke weed. I think he had a little family money, and the apartment was subsidized, so I think he only took me in to fuel his sedentary lifestyle of binge-watching cable news, eating cheeseburgers, and smoking weed he bought with my rent money, which required me overdrafting my account on the last day of every month to pay in full. Did I mention I was wholly unprepared to move here? As we grew to know each other, his idiosyncrasies became more apparent. He was clearly cyber-stalking several high-level people at Twitter, convinced they had a chummy relationship that solely consisted of him tweeting snide remarks at them with no response or acknowledgement of his existence, except for the occasional blocking of his account. He insisted that he had a plan to completely revolutionize Twitter by creating hyper-local subgroups that relied on geotagging or some other tech buzzword. What he didn't know was he was essentially describing Patch or Yik Yak, both of which were firmly established by this time, and ironic looking back now, considering how they both failed to take off. He also once firmly asserted, while we were both high, that he had invented Wi-Fi. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me, and I started peeking into the grocery bags hanging everywhere. What I discovered was a literal pharmacy of pill bottles, some sample size, others full prescription bottles. He explained to me that they were all prescribed by his psychiatrist to help him, but he didn't like the way they made him feel, instead choosing to medicate with weed, Despite all of these red flags, I lived there for 4 months, until eventually moving into a one-bedroom in Bed-Stuy I shared with a buddy from college for a year. I've had no contact with him since I left, except for a single text from him accusing me of stealing a book which he actually gave me. I don't miss that apartment, but I do wear it as a small badge of honor, proving my tenacity, red idiocy, and gullibility to live here. I was new to a big city and decided I didn't need my car anymore. I listed my car for sale, a 6-year-old Honda Accord. A normal, well-dressed man comes over to see it after a few phone calls about it. He's in his early 40s, and his name is James. He's buying it for his daughter in college. I always have my guard up when dealing with strangers, but so far James is personable and seems legitimate. He test drives it with me in it. He does a thorough inspection. He negotiates the price with me for a while. He asks me to hold the car for 2 days so he can get the money and come pick it up. I agree. A 2-day hold where I won't sell it to someone else. 2 days later, James follows up and we meet again. Midday, normal neighborhood in an urban city. James and I test drive the car one more time. He gives me a Chase Bank cashier's check, which I said was fine. I tell him he needs to come to the bank with me to cash this check and to get the title notarized over to him. This is when he starts acting nervous. We're pulled over on the side of my street discussing this, James in the driver's seat and me as the passenger. I figured if he was going to steal my car, he would have 2 days earlier. Now I'm fairly comfortable with him. He asked me to do one more car inspection with him, then we'd go to the bank. I agree, but I'm very set on doing the transaction at a bank. As we both get out to inspect the car again, he jumps back in and floors it as I try to get back in with him. He pulls away quicker than I can react, passenger door wide open. I tried to run after him and then realized I'm not as fast as a car. There are bystanders and I hysterically ask someone to call 911. One guy does. I had my phone, but my adrenaline was through the roof and didn't even think of it. As I'm on a stranger's phone with dispatch, an undercover cop car with 2 officers pulls out of an alley 5 feet from me. I wave them down and hysterically explain my story. They tell me to hop in the back of their car, which I do. I implore them to hurry and we can catch this guy. He just drove off. I explain the car and plate and everything. They assure me that they will not go on a high-speed chase with me in the car, but will radio it in to all surrounding officers, which they do. The guy gets away, and the officers drop me off at the police station to file a report. I file an insurance claim too, and I'm so mad at myself for letting this happen. I suppose it's better than if I was in the car with this guy, but I'm still mad. Of course, James's burner cell phone doesn't work as soon as he had left. I go through insurance and their protocols to ensure I'm not committing fraud for about 3 months. The week I'm supposed to get paid, I get a call from police. They found my car 3 states over. James was working with a partner in crime. Don't remember his name, let's call him Dickface. James stole the car and gave it to Dickface to sell, so it wasn't traceable back to James and Dickface would have plausible deniability if he was ever questioned. Well, Dickface sold my car to an average Joe who actually did have a daughter in college who needed a car. The daughter tried to register her new car at the DMV and it came up as stolen. So the cops arranged for me, the average Joe, and Dickface, whose contact info average Joe had as he paid him with a check and there was a paper trail, to meet with them at the station for a little chat. Dickface denies any involvement with James, but agrees to give us the money back that average Joe paid him if he can just leave without any problems. We all agree to this. Average Joe and I say his daughter can keep the car, and I'll take the money from Dickface. So eventually, I got paid for my car. But this experience sucked balls and was very stressful. Since then, I have bought and sold cars on Craigslist again. So no lesson was learned, except now I take a photo of the driver's license of all people I interact with at the start. Was moving out of an apartment that had washer and dryer hookups into one that did not. So I sold my washer and dryer, ended up having separate buyers. Guy who bought the dryer was great. He was getting it for his daughter who was going to college. I helped him load it up in his truck. He gave me the payment, and I never heard from him again. The guy who bought the washer was a different story. I got a text from him, asking if it was still available. We haggled the price, all normal stuff. We set a time, and I waited for him to get there. Now I only had 1 week left in the apartment, so I didn't care too much about random people coming to my home like I normally would. Pretty much all of my stuff was moved into my new place, but the internet wasn't turned on yet, so I was still just sleeping on an air mattress in the old one for the time being. He ended up being a few hours late and showed up in a truck that was used for transporting large glass panes. He had like 5 people with him, all crammed onto the front bench seat of the truck. They loaded it onto the truck with it leaning at a 30-degree angle against the glass pane rack, or whatever you would call it. He tried to haggle it down to a lower price, but I didn't budge. He left and I thought it was done. Later that night, I start getting texts from him about how it doesn't work and he wants his money back. I told him, as it was written in the post, that it was sold as is and was working. I assume he damaged it in the way he rigged it on his truck. Well, after a day, he starts calling me and cussing me out, texting death threats, and I have other random numbers calling me doing that same. 2 nights after I sold it, I wake up at 3 a.m. with people banging on my door yelling. Luckily, I lived on the 2nd floor with no easy access to the windows. I sat there for about 15 minutes while they continued to yell through the door. The next day, I moved the rest of my stuff into my new apartment and never went back other than to turn the keys in. I still got calls and texts from him on random numbers for 2 months over a $150 washer. I don't sell stuff on Craigslist anymore.